The iron door closing sounded like the throat of a beast swallowing the light. Inside was dense blackness, the faintest sound of metal scraping metal, and the smell of long-standing damp clinging to the lungs. In this chamber, pain had rules, silence had a price, and truth was twisted out by gears, ropes, and levers. Are you watching history or looking in a mirror? Don't blink. The next door is about to open, and there, they don't kill immediately. They teach fear to walk on two legs. Our imagined jailer tonight is an old clerk, hand-holding a brown leather ledger, documenting everything for justice. He moves from one cell to the next as if walking through the training programs of a factory. The first stop, an upright standing coffin, its exterior cast in the shape of a female figure with hollow eyes. It is called by a sweet name the Iron Maiden, as if putting a thin layer of sugar on an iceberg. He taps the door lightly. The echo is hollow. And then he turns to us. This is what people recounted. But the question is, when it was actually born. The Iron Maiden, a late medieval myth. If you've heard that the Iron Maiden is the quintessential horror of the Middle Ages, hold that thought for a moment. Because many of the existing artifacts we see today, such as the famous one in Nuremberg, appeared later, from the 18th century onward, likely reconstructions based on old obsessions. The idea, however, is entirely medieval, weaponizing fear through spectacle. But this very spiked box might be a late-era product, serving museums and the imagination more than the interrogation rooms of the Crusades. The terrifying thing is not the lying history, it is that humanity is always ready to believe in a screaming machine that speaks for them. So, if it is a child of the early modern period, why does it look so medieval? Because the philosophy behind it is consistent. Punishment is not just retribution, but a deterrent spectacle. The door isn't closed completely. The spikes inside are not meant to kill instantly. They target soft spots, arms, legs, abdomen, face, so the confined person hears their own body begging for rescue minute by minute. The audience doesn't need to see blood. They only need to witness prolonged silence. And that is the most profitable show. Honestly, do we like the Iron Maiden simply because it provides a neat, terrifying, and photogenic symbol? If so, that is a small confession of the modern age. We prefer boxes that tell stories, saving us from having to look at the real mechanism. The rack, the procedure of breaking, and the forced confession. But not every legend needs a spiked coffin. In the next corridor, the wooden frame lies still like a sleeping beast. The jailer places his hand on the crank, smiling faintly. This is the true offspring of the late European Middle Ages, unmistakable. The frame has rollers at both ends, ropes tied to the wrists and ankles, and a manually operated windlass. When he turns the crank one more notch, the shoulder pops. Another notch, the hip dislocates. No cuts, no blood, just the body being pulled out of its own shape. In the archives of the courts, it was ironically called the Duke of Exeter's daughter, giving it a noble surname to mask the smell of sweat and the sound of cracking joints. Signatures before and after a session often tell the whole story. Neat handwriting dissolves into shaky streaks of ink, then into a scrawl like a child's. The law might say, "We do not allow torture," but the command of power still slides like a knife on wood grain, and the rollers keep turning when a confession is needed. If the joints have popped, does that confession belong to the will or to the ropes? You answer that yourself, because even the judges often avoided looking directly. Turning to the rack, the story suddenly becomes less poetic and less controversial. There are room names, recorded victims, pre- and post-signatures, and authorities ordering its use in some cases. This device doesn't need to be called a lady or a daughter, it is pure mechanics. What made it effective was not its superior cruelty, but its ability to be traceless on the surface. The tortured person could still walk, still live, and still step onto the platform to read the confession. The audience, judges, clergy, common people were reassured that everything proceeded by procedure. When pain is standardized into notches on a crank, it becomes a procedure. Procedures are questioned less. The Judas cradle and the pear, shame and bodily violation. No bloodshed does not mean no destruction, the jailer says, stopping before a small hanging frame, below which sits a truncated pyramid spike. The technique here resembles cold, surgical dissection, keeping the person suspended between endurance and collapse, between body and honor. The spike doesn't need to be sharp, it only needs to be sturdy. The victim is hung by ropes, gradually lowered onto the point, forced to hold their breath within their own body. No sword, no hammer, just increasing pressure, sending signals to every muscle fiber. The cruelty lies not in the open wound, but in the duration, in the burden of exposure. You might ask, which documents say it was frequently used? We have textual shadows, spiritual instructions considering torture, justified if the accused is obdurate, and a series of inferences from various similar types of degradation. Some places recorded its use, others only told stories. One certainty, shame is also a knife. With the truncated spike, the horror lies in turning the body into a point of support for its own breakdown. The victim is suspended in a posture where every movement to lessen pain creates new pain. It is the perfect design if the goal is to erode the will. People become exhausted from having to hold still. Exhaustion is the biggest gateway to surrender. On a shelf inside, the jailer picks up something that looks like metallic fruit, split into 4 segments, with a central screw mechanism. The pear? He says, giving it a turn, the petals opening like a cold iron flower. This object makes modern people shudder because it invades areas of the body presumed inviolable. The act of linking this device to specific sins, the mouth for blasphemy, the body for supposedly defiled acts, is the final step of a cruel metaphor. Your mouth spoke wrongly, your mouth pays. That argument seems dangerously logical. Because if we agree, we have handed the key of vengeance to anyone with the power to label an act wrong. The pear, as noted, is both artifact and threat. Its appearance alone is enough to make anyone feel violated, even just by looking. Remember the golden rule of every power structure that prefers silence. You don't need to torture much if everyone knows you have an object ready to expand inside their mouth. That is enough. The breaking wheel, the spectacle of justice and public deterrence. The final chamber is not enclosed like the previous ones. It opens onto the public square. There stands a large wooden wheel, mounted on a post, which can be laid flat or hoisted upright. The jailer sighs. This is not fake, not disputed. It is the main public show. The rules here are written directly in legal manuals. Where to strike, how many blows, and what to avoid to prolong the agony without severing major arteries. The thighs, shins, left arm, right arm, ribs, and the heart is the final stop. When finished, the body is woven through the spokes of the wheel like a banner of warning, hoisted high for the wind and the public's gaze to complete the rest. Some thinkers called it necessary terror to preserve order. It sounds noble, until you stand close enough to see the faltering breath on someone's lips before it fully leaves. The question here isn't, is it cruel? Obviously. The question is, when the court climbs the wheel, to which rung does compassion descend? The wheel, finally, is where all arguments for deterrence for stability are laid bare. It does not seek confession. It does not seek truth. It does only one thing: etch a message onto the sky. To some extent, the wheel is the teacher of the entire society, forcing everyone to memorize one sentence. Don't try it. Who are the students? Everyone. Who pays the tuition? The person tied to the wheel. Who is rewarded? Order, at least for a few seasons. Do you notice the commonality of all these rooms? Every one is a stage. History does not hide that. It shows it off. All of them answer one question in multiple voices. Be silent. Looking in the mirror, rationalization, and modern echoes. Now, let's do what torture sessions hated most. Ask a counter question. The law claimed to protect the truth. But which truth? The voluntary truth, or the truth wrung out by the gears? The church and state claimed to protect the community's soul. But which soul is protected when it stands watching a body woven into the wheel's spokes? Order claimed to help the innocent sleep soundly. But whose groans does that sound sleep rely on? You might say, that is ancient history, true as ancient as those damp stone walls, but the principle is not yet old. We may no longer turn the crank in the dungeon, but we still twist information, twist public opinion, and twist algorithms. We may not erect the wheel in the public square, but we still erect a form of public shaming for deterrence. We may not insert the metal pair, but we still force speech into pre-approved molds. If you feel a chill down your spine, it's not the wind, it's because the medieval mounting pin is still on our wall. You have followed the jailer through the corridor. He closes the ledger, blows out the candle, and leaves the dungeon via the stone steps. Halfway up the stairs, he turns back. The most terrifying thing is not the tool, it is the reason people found them justifiable. Then, his shadow vanishes. Before leaving the chamber, retain a few fragments to anchor in your memory like notes stuck on a screen. The spiked coffins appeared late, catering to the morbid tastes of the early modern era. The rack was a real mechanism, well documented, turning pain into procedure. The cradle turned shame into a tool, targeting duration over blood. The pair was both a physical artifact and a psychological threat, its actual usage frequency debated. The wheel was a public declaration, where law wore the cloak of performance. Altogether, they answer one question in multiple voices: be silent. Now it is your turn. If you want to continue dissecting the science of torture, how the actual courts documented, allowed, or forbade torture in different periods, or if you want me to debunk the colored myths and the staged exhibits used to sell museum tickets, comment one word to choose the direction. INQ for interrogation techniques, real archives. Myth for demystifying legends, museums, and historical truth. Hit. Like so the algorithm doesn't turn off the lights in this dungeon, subscribe to secure your front row seat for the next part, and share the video with a friend who still believes that fear is the best medicine for society. Let them hear one small cry from behind the iron door. Fear never cures the truth, it only bends it.